Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We had, unfortunately, another air medical crash last night, this time out of Northern California.
A dramatic, shocking scene. Incredible new video of a helicopter crash tonight on Highway 50 in East Sacramento.
Now, this one took place right on a major highway just outside of big downtown, so there actually was video of this crash. Stick around and I'm going to get into it. Now, I do appreciate all the messages and emails when an event like this occurs, so please feel free to keep sending those my way. I read every one of them, so I don't always respond, but send me what you got. Now, this service is called Reach Air Medical, which is a huge flight service that covers much of the western part of the country, and their headquarters is actually based in Sacramento, which is where this crash occurred. Now, while Reach has been around since like the late 1980s, Reach, which stands for Redwood Empire Air Care Helicopter, anyway, they've been around, like I said, like since the late 1980s, and they were eventually acquired by Air Medical Group Holdings, along with Air Evac Life Team, Eagle Med, Medtrans, all of which now sit under the massive conglomerate we know as Global Medical Response, or GMR. Now, Reach has lots of cool aircraft, including H135s, H125s. They got fixed-wing Pilatus PC-12s and King Air 200s. But in this case, it's the Airbus H130. And this particular H130 was just built in 2021 with tail number November 414 Romeo X-ray. And even though this crash just happened, I have a sneaky suspicion, and I'm pretty sure that the year of manufacture will play a role, at least in the outcome of this crash. Not in the cause, but in the outcome of this crash. But stay tuned, we'll get back to that. Now, I believe that this particular base was Reach 5, which is based way north of the crash site in Redding, California. And when you check out their base on the map, you can see it actually right there. The aircraft is actually right there, or at least one of the aircraft is right there on the map. It looks like they actually have a competing base right next to them with PHI Air Medical. I don't know if they're still there or not, but now I always love these air medical bases that are located at airstrips and airports. It's just so cool to go to work and work in that atmosphere at an airport. Plus, it's super easy and always safe to land there. They usually have their own fuel. It's super cool to do that. But how cool is it that they also have a drag strip, a motocross track, and even a little shifter cart track right there by their base? That's pretty cool. Anyway, you can see that Redding is their normal coverage area, kind of see how far out they normally go. And if we jump over here to the ADS-B data, we can see that they are a pretty busy base with all or most of their flights taking place far north of Sacramento here, which is kind of in their normal coverage area, all in and about around the Redding area. But not last night. Last night, around 1700 hours or 5 p.m. local time, there in Redding, Reach 5 caught a call to head south. Now, it looks like they took off, just fine, and they flew south to pick up a patient in this area. Now, it kind of looks like they were possibly going to land at this small airport called Red Bluff Airport, maybe to rendezvous with an ambulance or something, but they end up landing at St. Elizabeth Hospital, which is just off to the east. Now, the ADS-B data shows that they landed in this field, but it kind of gets inaccurate when it's that low. But the hospital does have a pretty nice helipad out in the parking lot, so not sure where they actually landed, but in all honesty, it's not uncommon for small hospitals to have the helipad already occupied by another helicopter or something, and then you have to land in a field or some random parking lot or a road to get to your patient. It's really not that big a deal. Anyway, they get to St. Elizabeth Hospital at about 5:17 p.m., and they are inside doing patient care and packaging up the patient for about 30 minutes or so, which I don't know, is a little longer than normal, but who knows what kind of patient's situation that they had inside. I mean, they did fly this patient to UC Davis, which is a huge level 1 trauma center, also has its own pediatric hospital there as well, and they both kind of share the same landing pad, so it's kind of hard to tell which one they went to. But they could have had a sick kid, they could have had a traumatic adult, I don't know, it really doesn't matter, but that's who they were flying to UC Davis. Anyway, they take off from St. Elizabeth about 5:50 p.m. and they fly south to UC Davis. And this is kind of a long flight, maybe not by California air medical standards or even here in Oklahoma, but 40 minutes nonetheless, and they cruise at about, 2,000 or 2,500 feet, it looks like here, above the ground, which I love because it is way above the minimums. And if you subscribe to this channel and you watched me talk about this before, you know that I preach to not cruise super low and instead try to cruise. If you're cruising, fly a couple thousand feet above the ground, so when things do go awry, like losing an engine or hitting a bird, that there's time for the pilot to react. So this altitude's great. I think the local ground elevation is like 500 or 600 feet in Reading, where their base is, and then it kind of goes down to a couple hundred feet where St. Elizabeth Hospital is, and then really basically down to sea level almost, or maybe just 20, 30 feet above sea level by the time that they get to Sacramento. I know Sacramento's inland, but it sits in this big valley and it's pretty close to sea level there. Anyway, so they land on top of UC Davis, where they have a very cool double rooftop landing pad, and it takes them, just 25 minutes or so to drop off their patient and do whatever it is that they need to do and get back to the helicopter to take off. It kind of looks like the helicopter may have never turned off its ADS-B out or its power altogether, because it kind of doesn't show like a different leg here. It's kind of bouncing around here for the entire 25 minutes that the med crew is inside. But either way, by now it's about 7:05 p.m., which undoubtedly is getting close to shift change time for at least the pilot and maybe the whole crew, as I'm not sure if the med crew here is working 12 or 24-hour shifts. But either way, they now have about an hour flight home. And that doesn't include if they need to get fuel on the way home, which I don't know if they did or did not need to get fuel. But either way, they take off at about 7:05 p.m. and we can see them start to climb with a positive rate over here. And they really only get to about, 40, 45 knots of ground speed and really just a couple hundred feet off the ground when something obviously goes terribly wrong. Now remember, they are supposed to be climbing out with an ascent rate, like you might see a climb rate or an ascent rate, and really they only make it about a street or two over from the hospital before their ascent rate starts to decrease and eventually turns into a descent rate that just continues to kind of skyrocket, maxing out around 2,500 feet per minute as a descent rate. Now remember that a regular landing in a helicopter, especially a medical helicopter where they're far more conservative typically, would be somewhere around 200 feet per minute, or maybe even 300 feet per minute, down to at least a couple hundred feet off the ground. And you can see that they are descending at a rate of 2,500 feet per minute, which basically means that they are descending really without any power or hardly any power at all. Now they're not falling out of the sky like completely. They're not just falling out of the sky, but they are definitely descending with little or no power. Now we can also look at this in the KML format to get kind of a better visual, and you can kind of see, like I said, the same thing here right after takeoff where they start to climb for just a little bit before quickly losing power or some type of emergency and being forced to descend and, try to land right here in the middle of the highway. And then this happens. Ooh. Now, when I first saw this is the first thing I saw was this video. I didn't know any of this other stuff. I thought that this was like a landing zone in the middle of the highway for a motor vehicle collision or something like that. But you can obviously see that there's no other emergency vehicles around. And this is obviously the helicopter is attempting to make an emergency landing here in the middle of Highway 50. It's absolutely amazing that the pilot was able to avoid other cars or not hit anybody on the ground. Now, the first reports that I have so far is that the pilot, the paramedic, and the nurse on board, man, it says that they're all critical. I don't know, that can mean a lot of different things, but at least they're alive, and that at least one of them may have been trapped underneath the helicopter for some time before they could be extricated. Man, so what happened? Now, you folks should know by now that there is really no way to say what caused this accident at this point, and the NTSB is surely already on scene and starting their investigation. A preliminary report's probably going to come out in a few weeks, and then a final could take over a year or even more, just depending on the circumstances of the investigation, which is the big one is going to be, are they going to be able to interview the pilot and the med crew to get their account of what took place, because that's obviously going to be the most valuable information. But there are at least a few things that we can note and identify from what we've got here so far. First and foremost is that this aircraft did not descend under very much, if any, power. And it appears as if this was a full attempt at an auto rotation, right? That seems pretty obvious. But the turbine was at least running when it crashed, as you can hear the engine still under some form of power even for a few seconds after the crash. And there was reports on scene that it took, I mean, at least that's their words, that it took quite a while for the engine to stop spinning. So we know that at least the engine was under some type of power. But you could also see that as they start coming down the right skid, some people have said that this skid hits a power line. Now, I don't have the best eyes in the world. You guys probably see me squint on these videos a lot. But when you pull up the Google Maps, here's the two videos overlaid. So there's a second video where somebody's passing by and you can see this a street sign in the middle, and you see this sign over here, and you can clearly tell that this is the exact spot. And from what I'm seeing, all of the big power lines are on the north side of the road. And this incident happened on the south side of the road coming from the south. And I don't see anything here that shows me any power lines. There are some power lines that are further back off of the road behind these trees right here, but they're a lot lower. So unless there's a bigger power line that's going across the road that I don't see, like I said, getting old, maybe I don't see too well, but I don't see any power lines. And the bottom of this aircraft is clearly shaking. It's hard to tell whether or not it hit something and it kind of turned over onto its side. But either way, the aircraft is coming down. It doesn't have any power. It's not very stable. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know why that right skid shakes like that. But by all means, put that down in the comments. I have absolutely no idea. If you get an idea of why that right skid is shaking like that, then throw it out there. But either way, the pilot appears to be performing an auto rotation to the best of their abilities. And the camera goes away kind of right during those last couple seconds of impact or right before impact, so it's kind of hard to tell. But either way, the aircraft impacts the ground with a substantial force, injuring everyone on board. Good people story, though, is that there were many people who got out of their vehicles to help lift the helicopter off, I think, one of the females that was on this aircraft who was stuck underneath the aircraft. So kudos to the good people story. But now, I told you earlier about the age of this helicopter being a factor here, and here's why. There have been many previous crashes in AS350s and EC130s, which are basically the same overall airframe, in design, where there was either an explosion or a massive post-impact fire that immediately occurred during or after impact with the ground, killing everyone on board or severely injuring everyone on board. And some of those people were my friends and people that I knew that either died or were severely injured. And most of those crashes had far less of an impact with the ground than this crash, yet they still either exploded or caught on fire due to the lack of a crash-resistant fuel system. Through years of lobbying efforts by certain people that we'll talk about in another story someday, and many crashes over the years, most operators have either completely retrofitted these airframes with the updated crash-resistant fuel systems, or, as is the case here, Airbus now manufactures this helicopter with the crash-resistant fuel system already installed. Now, these crash-resistant fuel systems are paramount in protecting the lives of those on board who may experience a crash, which is obviously going to be traumatic, but might be otherwise survivable had they had these new crash-resistant fuel tanks and systems installed. So the lows here are that this aircraft obviously lost power for some reason. Is it engine failure, a FADEC failure, ran out of fuel, 10,000 other reasons could be a problem. Who knows? And that there are now 3 critically injured crew members. All of that sucks. It's terrible. The highs are that the pilots seem to be doing a great job of performing this auto rotation. Like I said, not sure what happened with this right skid there, if there's a power line that I can't see, or there's something else that's making the aircraft be unstable and shake around like that. But either way, no one on the ground was injured. The crash-resistant fuel systems appeared to have worked flawlessly, and that all these people banded together to help lift this aircraft off of these crew members, or at least off the one crew member. See, there are still good people out there in the world, no matter what social media keeps trying to tell us. I'm keeping that crew, the pilot, the paramedic, the nurse, all of their families in my thoughts. I hope you guys do too. That's all there is for now. More to come in the future. Y'all fly safe. Thanks for taking the time to watch. We'll see you next time.